Welcome to the Magic World Championships 2022. In the main event we have 4-colour Omnath versus 4-colour Omnath. And what's more, you still can't go to the pub.
No! No! No!
Wake up, wake up, wake up. You're just having a nightmare.
Oh my god, thank you. Oh, it was horrible. It was 2022. Omnath was still ruining Standard. Oh, it was terrible.
Omnath was banned.
Huh? Oh, that's fantastic. Oh, thank God. Oh.
Also, you don't play standard last time I checked.
No, but it means it'll be nice and cheap for Commander now. I can't wait to play it down the pub.
Pub's still closed.
No! Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be doing a Commander deck tech for Omnath, Locus of Creation, the new 4-colour Omnath from Zenikar Rising. The plan is I'm going to do an overview for a budget version and then a more fully tuned up version. So with that, let's get into it. Omnath, Locus of Creation is red, green, white, blue for a 4/4 legendary creature elemental. When Omnath enters the battlefield, draw a card. It also has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 4 life if it is the first time this ability has resolved this turn. If it's the second time, add red, green, white, blue. If it's the third time, Omnath deals 4 damage to each opponent and each planeswalker you don't control. So when building a command deck, the first thing I like to work out is how the deck wants to win. Once you have that down, it's much easier to fill in the blanks up to that point, as it were. With this build, we're trying to maximise the amount of landfall triggers we can get in a turn to really go off with the commander. Now, a lot of landfall cards incidentally make creatures, things like Avenger of Zendikar, Scoot Swarm, Felidar Retreat. So for the win condition of the deck, we're going to be putting in a load of token makers that trigger from us playing the lands, which also trigger the Omnath, making this big ball of value, will go wide, and we'll kill them with something like a Crater Hoof or a Beastmaster Ascension. So the first part of the deck is going to be the token makers that will trigger from us playing lands. Avenger of Zendikar is a bit backwards on this list because it requires you to have lands in play when you play it. But each land after that will buff your team and make all the little tokens you made really, really big. So the rest of the landfall tokeny package, we're going to be running Felidar Retreat from the new set, landfall, make a 2/2 white cat beast. We're also going to be running Zendikar's Royal, landfall, make a 2/2 green elemental creature. And in the same vein as those enchantments, we also have Retreat to Emeria. 3 and a white for enchantment. When we play a land, create a 1/1 core ally creature token. This one does double duty as it also can buff our team so we can swing for the kill. We also have Emeria Angel, 2 white for a flying 3/3 angel with landfall. Make a 1/1 white bird creature token with flying. So these ones are great because they have built-in evasion as well. We're going to be running slightly older Omnath, Locus of Rage, which is 3 red, green for a 5/5 legendary creature elemental. Landfall, whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, create a 5/5 red and green elemental creature token. Whenever this Omnath or another elemental you control dies, Omnath deals 3 damage to any target. So this will include your commander as well, which is really good to know. We have another legendary elemental from the new Zendikar set, Phylath World Sculptor, 4 red-green for a 5/5. When it enters the battlefield, create a 0/1 plant creature token for each basic land you control. So similar to Avenger of Zendikar. However, this one goes up instead of wide, as it has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, put 4+1/+1 counters on target plant you control. So like Avenger, this still gives us an immediate board state going wide. However, this one can buff one thing going up. So you can hit him with that one at least until you hit the Beastmaster type effects later on. A card that's been reprinted a ton is Rampaging Baloths. 4 green for a 6/6 beast with trample. Whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, create a 4/4 green beast creature token. This is our biggest landfall threat because you make those 4/4s every turn. That can get done and out of hand. And then we'll be running Omnath Locus of Creation's best friend, Scoot Swarm. 2 and a green for a 1/1 insect. It has landfall. Whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, create a 1/1 green insect creature token. If you control 6 or more lands, create a token that's a copy of Scoot Swarm instead. This gets out of hand obscenely quickly. You just get a board state with these cards so easily that by running just these 8, all we need to do is hit one of them and then we're just going to go wide so quickly with the amount of landfall triggers that we have in the deck. So with the token makers already in the deck, you can basically run whatever big dumb payoff you want in this. The classic is Crater Hoof Behemoth, but that's probably quite pricey right now. So there are some cheaper options. For example, Beastmaster Ascension. Basically play this card on the turn you're going to swing. Don't leave it out there for it to get blown up ahead of time. For a sneaky one, you have Triumph of the Hordes. You don't need to deal 40 damage to someone, you only need to deal 10 with Infect. So this card is basically a Crater Hoof as well. And then there are the 2 tinier little baby hoofs. We have Decimator of Provinces, and we have Endrace Forerunners. When we're going as wide as we are, +2/+2 and Trample is more than enough to get the job done, most of the time. So going wide with the token makers and then buffing them with one of our big dumb idiots is the primary win condition of this deck. We have some other ways we can use landfall to our advantage and just get the damage through a bit earlier. We have things like Spitfire Legek and Tunneling Geopede, which are effectively the same card. The important part is landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, this creature deals 1 damage to each opponent. Those 1 damages will add up very quickly, and if they're not answered, they will deal a ton of damage across the board. In a similar vein, but maybe not as obvious, we're going to be running Valakut Exploration as well. 2 in red for an enchantment. Landfall, whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card for as long as it remains exiled. At the beginning of your end step, if there are cards exiled with Valakut Exploration, put them into their owner's graveyard. Then Valakut Exploration deals that much damage to each opponent. This card is awesome in this deck, because not only is it card advantage, it's also a win condition. Churn through your deck with the landfall triggers, anything you don't want to play immediately, stick it in the graveyard, and then deal the damage to all of your opponents. Why these 3 cards are good is because they say to each opponent, so it scales nicely depending on the size of the game. So the next set of cards are all ones that give us that ability to trigger landfall multiple times a turn. We don't want to be playing one land a turn in this deck. We want to be playing a ton of lands, and these cards will help us do this. Some of the cards on this list are more expensive than others. There are budget versions. They will still do very well in this deck. But if you have the expensive ones, stick them in. Or if you don't, wait until they get reprinted. They'll come down in price. Pick them up then and stick them in the deck, and you'll have a great time. So the obvious ones to get through first are cards that just let you play multiple lands a turn. Things like Azusa Lost But Seeking allows you to play 2 additional lands a turn. Dryad of the Elysian Grove lets you play 1 additional land per turn, and also fixes you for each of your colours of mana. Wayward Sawtooth also lets you play an additional land, and then also can just become a 3 mana 5/5 beta when you hit the City's Blessing, which you will in this deck. Another good creature for this is Mina and Den Wildborn. Just been reprinted in the newest Commander set, so it should be nice and cheap for everyone. And the old classic Exploration, for 1 green for an enchantment, lets you play 1 additional land on each of your turns. These all stack together, but generally speaking you only need 1 of these out at any one time to really get the deck going. For some more budget-friendly options, you could run Song of Creation, 1 and a Teamer for an enchantment. You can play an additional land on each of your turns. Whenever you cast a spell, draw 2 cards. At the beginning of your end step, discard your hand. We have Girapur Ori. That lets everyone play an additional land, and at the beginning of each player's upkeep, if that player has no cards in hand, that player draws 3 cards. And in a very similar vein, we have Rites of Flourishing, which is 2 and a green for an enchantment. At the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws an additional card. Each player may play an additional land on each of their turns. So the thing to remember with symmetrical effects like these is, you are the one benefiting from them most. Your deck is designed to take advantage of these extra land drops, so by playing them, you will still come out ahead, so they're still really good includes in the deck. There are a ton of spells which give you one-time effects to trigger your landfall. Things like Growth Spiral, green and a blue, instant, draw a card, you may put a land from your hand onto the battlefield. You have its bigger brother, Urban Evolution, draw 3 cards, you may play an additional land this turn. There's also Explore, you may play an additional land this turn, draw a card. All the way down to Enter the Unknown, which for just 1 green lets you play an additional land on this turn. There's also a ton of creatures which will trigger your landfall as well. You have Elvish Reclaimer, which lets you sack a land and search your library for another land. This triggers landfall. Because we have access to white, we can run Knight of the Reliquary, which will get bigger while also helping us trigger landfall a bunch of times. And in the same vein, Marasa Rootgrazer from Zenikar Rising lets you put a basic land from your hand into the battlefield, and you can tap it to return a basic land you control to your owner's hand, which you can then play again to trigger landfall multiple times. Some other great budget creatures for this deck would be cards like Elvish Rejuvenator, Llanowar Scout, Sakura Tribe Elder, and Springbloom Druid. You also have things like Harrow, or Roiling Regrowth, or Kalani Heart Expedition, will all help trigger our landfall a ton of times, and really do some dumb things in the deck. So those parts are the engine of the deck. Let's get on to the part that I always like to make sure I have enough of in a deck, which is card draw. So one of the best creatures in a deck like this is Tatiova Benthic Druid from Dominaria. 3 and a Simic for a 3/3 legendary Merfolk Druid. Whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain a life and you draw a card. Another creature that'll help draw us cards and get advantage later on in the game is Tireless Tracker. Spend your spare mana cracking those clues and drawing some cards. As we're in blue, I'm going to mention Ristic Study. Play it if you have it. Don't buy one now if you don't. It'll get reprinted soon, trust me. Famous last words there. But to work best with all the lands we're going to be playing, I definitely recommend playing Horn of Greed. Again, remember what I said about symmetrical effects. You will get the most out of this card. Everything will be fine. And then with all the mana we're going to be dumping into this deck, you can play some X spells, which will draw us a load of cards. Things like Sphinx's Revelation. Anytime we have some spare mana, just dump it in, gain some life, draw some cards. It'll be great. So because we're playing white, we have access to all of the best removal in Magic. You have a Path to Exile, run a Path to Exile. You have a Sword to Plowshares, run a Sword to Plowshares. You have a Wrath of God, you have an Aura Shards, play these cards. Even something like Solar Blaze is really good and pretty budget. Run the best bits of board wipe and the best bit of interaction you have available to you. If you want to run counter spells, run some counter spells. If you want to just play board wipes, play some board wipes. You do you. So this next part is something I've been thinking of for a while, and I haven't really found the right deck for it, but I think in Omnath, I think this will work really well. I like cards that let us play with the top of the library, and with all the additional land drops we're going to be getting by things like Azusa, we won't get stopped by having lands on top anymore. So creatures like Courser of Crufix, Magus of the Future, Oracle of Moldiah, which hopefully will get a reprint soon, and Rada, Hurt of Keld, all let us play lands off the top of our library. In a similar vein, we have Experimental Frenzy and the OG Future Sight. But by having all these cards in the deck, it basically turns our library into our hand. What these allow us to do is to just dump our hand and to then just churn through the top of our deck, hitting land drops, playing spells with all the mana that we have. I think this part will be really powerful, and it's definitely something that having the 4 colours with Omnath allows us to do. One of the reasons this is in the more expensive part, I mean none of the cards are super expensive on that list apart from Oracle of Moldiah, which again hopefully we'll get a reprint, is that these do work better with fetches. These work better with ways of shuffling at the top of your library if there's a card on top you don't like. There are a lot of budget fetches, which I'll go over in the land section, so if this is something you want to try, give it a go, don't worry about the budget, we can play Evolving Wilds, it'll still do a good job. So most of the cards I've gone over up until now have been ways of getting 1 or 2 land drops a turn, triggering all the stages of our Omnath at every point in the game. But what if you want to win a bit quicker? Cards like Animist's Awakening, Boundless Realms, Nahiri's Lithoforming, Scapeshift, all those play a ton of lands into play in one turn and to really kick things off. These cards are basically like one-hit win conditions in these decks. Animist's Awakening and Nahiri's Lithoforming especially are nice and cheap right now, so they're definitely good pickups for this deck. So with all those things that let us play multiple lands a turn, we still need to run ramp in the deck. We still want to be getting lands from the deck and putting them into play. The ramp package I put together for this lets you fix your colours while you're doing it as well. By that I mean all of the ramp goes and get non-basic lands, so we can fix ourselves by playing some cheap jewels, which I'll go over in the land section. Farseek is 1 and a green for a sorcery that lets you search for a plains, an island, a swamp, or a mountain and puts the card into the battlefield tapped. Again, doesn't have to be basic. We also have Hour of Promise, 4 and a green for a sorcery that does a similar thing, but up to 2 lands and puts them onto the battlefield tapped, and also can make some nice zombie friends. We have Hunting Wilds for 3 and a green for a sorcery. We're mainly going to be playing this to get 2 forest cards out of our deck and put them onto the battlefield to help trigger double landfall. Another version of this is Ranger's Path, which is effectively the same card. And the better version of both of those is Skyshroud Claim, 3 and a green for a sorcery. Search your library for 2 forest cards and put them onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Importantly, that doesn't say untapped, so you can play this 4-drop and then still play a 2-drop afterwards, which is great. There's also a Crowsand Verge. It doesn't do much the turn it comes in, but with 1 card we get 3 landfall triggers and we also get to fix our mana as well. The last 2 parts are Nature's Law and Wood Elves. Again, more ways of searching out forests. So for our mana base, you want to run the best lands you have available to you. If you have proper fetch lands, then run some proper fetch lands. That would be great. My aim for the deck was to have a nice balance between what I have available to me and not having to spend too much money. So with the ramp package I talked about earlier, the most important part is to have the word forest on the card, and there are some nice budget versions of these available to us. Things like Canopy Vista, Cinderglade, Ketratriome, Scattering Groves, and Sheltered Thicket. These cards can all be tutored for with the ramp package that we went through earlier. Ketratriome is the most expensive of these, and is unfortunately the most important because it's the only one available to us that actually gets blue. When they get around to completing the cycles, these will all be great includes for the deck, and Commander players will rejoice because of nice budget options. There are some also nice budget fetch lands available to us as well. There's the original slow fetches, which can go in. There's also things like Blighted Woodland, Myriad Landscape, and Crowsand Verge, which we went over earlier, which again all trigger landfall 3 times, which is great. Then there's obviously Evolving Wild and Terramorphic Expanse for fixing and double landfall triggers. Also worth mentioning for a more budget list is the Bounce lands. In this deck, they'll let you replay your lands again and again to make sure you continue hitting landfall. On the utility side of things, there's things like Terrain Generator, which works better in a budget list as you'll be running more basic lands. And then on the more win condition side of things, there's Field of the Dead and Valakut the Molten Pinnacle. Field of the Dead will make us a ton more creatures for our big win condition to go off on. And then Valakut, combined with Dryad of the Elysian Grove, turns all of our land drops into lightning bolts, which is great fun. Throw them around. You get a bolt, and you get a bolt, and you get a bolt! Okay, one last thing I want to go over before we get out. There is another way you can take part of the deck. It's a little bit more horrible, and some people may not like you, but it is exceptionally powerful, so let's talk about the graveyard. So by running cards like Ramunap Excavator, Ancient Green Warden, Crucible of Worlds, Renin 6, and Life from the Loam, these will let you play cards repeatedly from your graveyard. With these, it means you can run things like Strip Mine, and Wasteland, and Ghost Quarter, so you continually keep your opponent's lands in check and strip them of resources. By running these, it makes cards like Harrow and Lotus Field way better, because it means you can replay the lands you had to get rid of again and again, which is great. And if you're running cards like these, then you can also run things like Titania, Protector of Argoth, Sylvan Safekeeper, Zuran Orb, and Trade Routes to give you a load of value when things get in the graveyard. So what really makes this package really horrible is that if you run these, you can also run Armageddon. I'm pretty sure Titania plus Armageddon just wins you the game. And remember to float your mana so you can then cast Splendid Reclamation and get them all back again. Hooray! Also, I'm going to mention, my view on land destruction is very similar to my view on Cyclonic Rift. I'm fine with it if it wins the game then and there. Don't do it, by God, don't do it, if the game will then last another hour afterwards. Be reasonable, be sensible. We need to look after each other in this time. So thank you very much, everyone. That was the deck tech. Let me know what you think. Down below, I'll be putting lists to a budget build and a more optimal build. Check them out. Let me know what you think. Comments, like, subscribe, all that great stuff. Thank you very much for watching, everyone, and goodbye.